feel like one team people are sleeping on a lot when it comes to this season is the Cleveland Browns. Yeah, I know it's the Cleveland Browns. The Cleveland Browns don't have the best track history despite who they have, at their helm of being a successful team. But I feel like the way that people are talking about it is like this team is going to be, 4-12, 4-13. They're going to be one of the worst teams in the NFL, which I really don't think is the case here. But in this video, I'm going to be making my case on why the Browns are the most slept-on team in the NFL right now. So before I get into it, if you haven't yet, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. Tap the bell icon for future sports content. And without further ado, let's jump into this. So obviously the Browns, like I said earlier, they don't have the best track history of being a successful team. They're probably one of the more least successful teams in the Super Bowl era for the most part. But over the past couple of seasons, they've been improving. And then they've also been, getting worse. But they're getting there somehow. It's kind of balanced. They're kind of getting worse and they're kind of getting, better. Like I said, a really balanced team in a lot of ways. But let's talk about the Browns team for the most part. Now, let's look at their defense, which is, still pretty good. Obviously led by Myles Garrett. But then you have those players here and there who could step up and make some good plays to help this defense get better. Like Denzel Ward, he had a pretty rough season last year, but he could improve. You also have Martin Emerson, who was pretty good last year. They have Jeremiah, or J.O.K. with him, what I'm going to call him, who was a really good linebacker. Like I said, they have some really good pieces on this team who I think could break out and make this defense even better than what it already is. Now, on paper, the Browns had a top 20 defense. However, that was before they finally fired their defensive coordinator and they brought in Jim Schwartz, who for the most part led a somewhat successful Eagles defense during his time with them. So based off that, their defense only should get better this year with the addition of him. Now, they also made a few more additions this offseason to get their team even better. They signed Dalvin Tomlinson, who, obviously I know from my time or during my time as a New York Giants fan. I'm still am. I don't know why I'm saying during my time as a New York Giants fan. But yeah, I know him during my time as a Giants fan. He was a really good run stopper for, for the most part. He was a really good run stopper for the Vikings too. They also just brought in Shelby Harris, who's also a really good run stopper. So it's obvious they're putting a really big emphasis on run stopping this season, which I don't know where exactly they rank when it comes to run stopping this team last year. All right, looking at it now, yeah, they were pretty bad against the run. There's no sugarcoating it. They were like top 10 in the league worst against the run. So, yeah, that's probably why they put a lot of emphasis on it now. So for the most part, with the addition of those two guys, I would expect to see some significant improvement in the run stopping department this year. I also forgot to mention, they also signed that Darius Smith was a really good pass rusher in his own right. So now, opposing teams have to worry about guarding Myles Garrett and now Darius Smith. Two very good pass rushers now. One is obviously more significantly better than the other one, but one is good in his own right, just in another tier, obviously. But those two guys are obviously still going to cause even more havoc for teams now. They also got Juan Thornhill, who is another okay addition to their secondary. He's obviously not going to turn their secondary around by himself because obviously those other guys are going to do that, but he was a pretty okay addition, I would say. So you've seen their defense, which I think will take a big step up this year, at least in terms of improvement. And I think they could be back to that defense they once were a couple years ago. And yeah, so like I said, I think they're going to take a big step up this year. But now it's time to look at their offense. Now it's time to look at their offense led by none other than the mysterious, the most notorious man himself, Deshaun Watson. Now, we've seen what Deshaun Watson can do at high levels before, even if his team is not exactly in the best shape. Like, look what he did in 2020. His team was like one of the worst in the league. And I think he had like the most passing yards in the league that season. So, obviously, we've seen Deshaun Watson can play at a high level. Now, obviously, what he did, when he came back wasn't exactly, the best, where the judge, obviously, he has not played a game since 2020 before that season. So, yeah, it's been a good while till he's actually played. But it's no reason to sugarcoat it either. He threw like 7 touchdowns, 10 interceptions in just a few games. So, obviously, not exactly the best, showcase either, I would say. But not to worry though, because he's going to have a full slate of weapons in the offensive line at his disposal. And I think his weapons are, for the most part, pretty good. Obviously, you have Amari Cooper, who was really good last year with Jacoby Brissett. You have David Njoku, who is still probably one of the more underrated tight ends in the league. You also have Elijah Moore, who they brought in from the Jets earlier this offseason. And they also brought in Cedric Tillman from Tennessee in the draft. So obviously, he's going to have a full slate of weapons at his disposal this season. And honestly, I think it's all up on Deshaun Watson to do good this season. I don't think, I think that's it. Deshaun Watson, the X factor for this team. Nobody else, in my opinion. Now, obviously, the defense is going to have to do some work, but at the end of the day, Deshaun Watson is the X factor for this team. This team is going to succeed. Deshaun Watson is going to have to be the one to step up. And with the weapons he has at his disposal right now, I don't see any reason why Deshaun Watson should do bad in any way. He has a pretty formidable offensive line. He has a full slate of weapons at his disposal at receivers and tight ends. So I don't see any reason why he shouldn't do good. And if all goes wrong, he still has the best, if not one of the best running backs in the league in Nick Chubb at his disposal. So like I said, he has weapons at pretty much all his offensive skill positions right now. Running back, wide receiver, tight end. He has weapons everywhere. So if Deshaun Watson, fails, there's going to be some questions. But like I said, there should be no reason, no excuse for Deshaun Watson to succeed with this team whatsoever. I mean, unless he gets injured, there should be no reason whatsoever why he can't go back to the same Deshaun Watson he once was in Houston. This is not really a Browns team I look at and say they're going to finish below the Steelers. I think they could finish, above the Steelers, obviously. This is not a Browns team that I look at and say they're not making the playoffs for sure. This is a team that can definitely make the playoffs if all the sides come together and everything works out. Now, Kevin Stefanski, he has to step up. Yes, step up big time. But when you look at this roster as a whole, I don't see any reason why the Browns should fail this year. I don't see any reason why they should be a bad team. Now, obviously, they're in a pretty tough division. They're in a division with the Ravens, the Bengals, the Steelers even. They're in a tough division, but I don't see any reason why they should get swept by any of those teams, in my opinion. I think they should at least split one game from every one of those teams, even the Bengals. Unless an injury happens, I think they should. I don't see a reason why they should finish anywhere other than third in this division. This is not disrespect to the Steelers. This is more of the Browns having a way better team this year, in my opinion. And I know he has a bit of a QB rust. I know he does. But there should be no reason why Deshaun Watson should not step up and bounce back to where he once was this season. This Browns team, without a doubt, should be loads better than where they were last season. It's time for the Browns to put the pieces together, and it's time for them to go out and make a playoff run, possibly. It's also time for them to finally take a big step up, or some coaching changes might be needed in the future.